Hello and welcome to the new episode of the Digital Innovators podcast. It's my pleasure today to have Mike Fraser, who is the CEO at the College of American Pathologists as a guest. So welcome, Mike. Great to have you
Thank you.
here.
Thank you.
Mike has been in numerous leadership roles over the last 18 years, especially of his career in multiple associations. He's not new to the world of professional and medical associations at the state level, national level. And as an executive, he was recently an executive sponsor of the Digital Innovation Project called CAP On Demand, which is a Netflix style digital library, which was just launched 3 months ago in July of 2025. So, Mike, again, great to have you here. I can't wait to dive deeper a little bit. But first, maybe I ask you to introduce yourself and your organization, just so that everyone understands a little bit, the scope, the size, and your meetings, things like
Sure.
that.
Well, thanks, Buzzy, and thanks for that introduction. And of course, thanks to you and your team for helping us get AP on demand. And not over yet. Just the first chapter's been written. I'm Mike Fraser. I'm the CEO here at the College of American Pathologists, and the CAP is a very large medical association. We represent pathologists here in the United States and in Canada, but we work with pathologists around the world. Our membership is about 19,000, both practicing pathologists and folks in training. And the CAP's a little different from a lot of other medical associations and medical societies because not only do we have the core membership function, but we also have an extremely large laboratory accreditation and proficiency testing business. So a lot of the work at the CAP and a lot of what we do globally is working with laboratories, both with pathologists, but also other laboratory professionals to advance quality in their laboratories.
That's great. And then you have one main annual meeting during the year, right? I think it's now in
Yeah, we
September, right?
actually just completed our annual meeting. We're in September here and it went really well. And one of the things we featured there was some of our work in digital innovation, both how we're approaching education, but also the use of AI in pathology and some of those other areas that are pretty hot right now.
Oh, great, great. Yeah, I'm curious to hear more about that. When I was a student in the medical school, I actually worked for 2 years as one of those students. They had them in Europe that helps younger students because I was maybe in my fifth year or fourth year. So I worked for 2 years helping them with the microscopes and looking at the tissue and figuring out what it is. So I cannot imagine one of the better use cases for AI to assist and help and increase the accuracy, things like that. Yeah. Great. So you and I met, or we didn't actually meet. It was the ASA conference, August of 2024. I think it was in Cleveland. And I was presenting there together with the ACC. And I learned later on that you were there because you never know. That's the thing when you're speaking, you never know who is there. And I really appreciate your first comments. And I think that's how we actually, like, quote unquote, met. So I was wondering what was actually happening at the CAP when it comes to digital content and that whole topic that led you to explore further this new approach to digital education. What was the
Yeah, yeah.
context?
I appreciate the presentation you gave. And one of the reasons why I really liked it was because you featured the ACC. It was really about how they deployed this. It was not a sales show. It was more of a, strategy conversation. And one of the things that I think I shared was maybe a little unusual for the folks you work with, because I wasn't really all that interested in monetizing this content. I was really looking at how can we make membership more valuable to members. There's a lot of associations out there that, I use the term nickel and dime. They're existing members, so they pay dues and then they start charging them on top of that for everything else. And one of the things that we were trying to do here is really think about what's the whole package? What's the whole package that we can give to members as a benefit? So while I know there's a lot of associations that are really interested in using these kinds of platforms to generate revenue here at the CAP, we really wanted to think first about how can we make education and educational opportunities and some of our content available to members as part of the package that they've already invested in their membership dues. And we're in a more of a privileged position to do that, I think, because of the large business we operate and the way that underwrite a lot of our operations. So I know most of my colleagues would not be able to do that. So clearly, monetizing this and the subscription model makes a lot of sense, but we want to just package it in. So I was listening really more from the perspective of how can this tool, the Evermed tool, help us organize the massive amount of content that we produce as a medical association, and how can we help it move forward the idea of making content easier to find for our members and more personalized for our members. That was feedback that I heard after my first or second week on the job here at the CAP. We have a very legacy website. One of the primary functions of our website is to service customers in laboratories globally. And some of the member information was hard to find. So there was a lot of feedback about make it easier to find your education opportunities. A lot of our content was behind a paywall in our learning management system, which required additional functionality and passwords and all the things, that members needed to access to get to that content. So I was looking at this as a way of really thinking through, maybe we don't necessarily need to update the website we have. Maybe we can acquire a tool that will be an adjunct, similar look and feel, but allow us to move faster in making this content, our education content, accessible to members.
Yeah, you touched upon many important points. So I was taking notes
Yeah,
here.
sure. We
So
could get
yeah,
into some more of
Y-
those.
yeah, and the starting point, like we do have massive amount of content, and I assume the constant content, of course, coming from a leading association in the space is it trusted, is fresh, is credible. Of course, quality. I've seen different types of things, but very often if it's a video content, there are slides or a video, talking head kind of thing. So massive amount of content, but for some reason it doesn't get watched, and in some cases monetized. In your case, it sounded like the problem you're trying to solve is engagement. So how to get this content out in a way that people will watch. Is that fair to say?
I think engagement was key, and making the content easier to find was key. Making it more interesting was also important, which obviously will increase engagement. I mean, I think our model primarily was multifaceted. We had lots of different ways of getting these, our podcasts, our webinars, our talks, our annual meeting content out, but it wasn't organized as a cohesive product that a member could easily access. And that's what Evermed did for us, gave us that back end, again, without having invest in revisions to our website, which would be significant. We're this a lot more quickly. I think it took us just under 100 or over 100 days to get this thing going. And what we've done is really start with the content that normally would come from our annual meeting and repurpose some of that for CAP on demand. But the goal is actually not just to put that content online, which a lot of people saw because they came to the annual meeting, but really to produce new content for CAP on demand. And as you said, we have a large organization. As you said, we have a lot of scientific resource. We have numerous content committees. We actually have over 70 committees and councils in our organization. About 30 of those are focused specifically on scientific areas within pathology. And those groups review current science and produce guidelines. They produce recommendations. They share how the field is evolving and what it means for pathologists, for patients, for laboratorians, laboratory scientists. And what our committees are most excited about, and several board members are really excited about, is wow, we could create content from those groups more easily, more standardized fashion, and get that out to our members through the CAP on demand platform to the want to get it. And, to me, that's the real potential. I mean, we talked about having, channels within CAP on demand where a particular almost be like a network or a channel where all of their work specific to that area could be easily accessed. So yeah, it's about sharing our content. And like you said, it's about engaging people, but it's really about curating everything we have in a way that folks can truly find it and consume it. And that's what we really like about it too. And there's ways that we work with you all and our instructional designers and our learning professionals to design the content. So it's not an hour of somebody speaking at a conference that you didn't go to, but it's chunked out into digestible pieces. Again, that makes it more engaging. And one of the things we also really started thinking about is, it doesn't matter if it's for continuing medical education for CME or not. It could be content that's professional development. It could be content that's just interesting. It could be news. So there's lots of different ways we can share what we're doing with members. And the on-demand platform lets us curate that in a way that, again, is easy for members to find. It's not a bunch of separate podcasts you have to subscribe to, or not a bunch of different LMSs you need to log into, or all the things that create barriers or friction to engagement.
Yeah. Yeah. And as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking like 3 or 4 different buckets. And one is content itself, like where it comes from. You mentioned there's conference content to start with, webinar content, podcast. But in a limited time that I've known you, I sensed from the beginning that you had a vision for the content to increase over time. I mean, both quality and quantity, and potentially have custom content. So that's like one, and I see that with our clients. It's starting with conference content. It's a low hanging fruit. It's fresh. It's credible. Is there a better, more custom content? Yes. But usually that one kind of the starting point. The other one, this idea is interesting of consolidation, right? Because you mentioned several times content was in different places, different parts of LMS, and our experience has been that the end user of the association, let's say members, are professionals. They go to 5, 6, 10 different places to stay up to date. And if they find everything from one of those places in one place, that's already, even if technology is subpar, that's already a big win, because they don't need to pull their hair out to go through a catalog and choose that import. So I was wondering whether that idea of consolidation, which is really sounds simple, but it's a strategic, important idea. Was that something that you were already discussing internally, independent of the technology already, and we're getting feedback from end users, and how did
Yeah,
that come
yeah.
about?
I think it was maybe not as formalized as you just summarized, but I've been in the association business for a long time, as you mentioned in my intro. And, a lot of what I've spent my career in working with my teams to produce is content. It's educational content. It's learning content. Associations are knowledge producers. We're in the knowledge business. And the goal was always to just create stuff. We had to actually make that available. Your typical association isn't into the network broadcasting business. It isn't into the content curation business. So one of the big trends that I talk with my team about is moving from a point of view that focuses on content creation and actually moves us to a place where the association is that trusted, valuable source for content curation. And I think, again, that especially now with some of the conversations about science and truth and whose recommendations to follow and all those things, which are very political, unfortunately, associations have an even greater role in providing accurate, valid, credible information to members and to the public. That's one of the things we need to do better. So I always was interested in using the on-demand platform not only to showcase the content we create, but curating it for members so that they knew they would get the best, the most recent, the most relevant, the most accurate, the most scientifically credible in one source, as you mentioned. And I think that's something all associations need, especially our association partners in medical science need to really think a lot more about. The other opportunity that raises is opportunity for collaboration with our partners. There are a number of pathology subspecialty organizations. So there are actually 42 plus or minus subspecialty organizations in pathology. They're organized by academic versus non-academic, or those folks who are interested in digital pathology and folks working in different settings, but also, parts of the body and particular diseases or techniques. So those 42 groups, they're all facing the same challenge. They're a lot smaller than we are in pretty much all cases, but perhaps this could be a platform that they'd be interested in, right? So then we become this convener of all that's being produced. Again, there's lots of different challenges associated with that, especially if those groups rely on the revenue associated with those courses and that content. But again, those hard things never stop me. Drive my team crazy, but certainly never stop me. The other opportunity there is we're a national organization. We do not have state chapters, but there are independent state pathology societies in various places, and they're creating content. Why couldn't CAP On Demand again be a place that housed a lot of that, a lot of good stuff there? So not only allows us to share what we're doing, but potentially and curate that, but potentially find the best of what everybody's doing and curate that. And I think that again, that adds a lot more value to the tool and to our members.
Yeah, I love that idea, and I think that there are associations that have that kind of broad reach, national level, but also there are multiple state level organizations that don't have a good home for that content. That would benefit for the end user to find everything in one place and find the channel from XYZ organization. I've seen it in clinical work associations focused on clinicians that can be channeled also different partners there like hospital systems and things like that but it's all in one place and it's easier, and then there is that curation that basically signals trust, and especially in the context that you're talking about today and politics and everything. So I'm wondering that you recognize this issue, and when we first talked, you recognized the issue of the content, quantity, and quality of the content experience, and making it easier to search, more Netflix-like, personalized. So that content experience, right? If you had Netflix movies and shows, but in a kind of static user experience, no one would watch it, right? And then the third one is consolidation of content. I'm wondering whether that issue it was already recognized at the CAP. But when you came, I think it's been about 2 years. So you were there. Was that issue already recognized? Was it tackled already? Was there something? Because I noticed that some associations live in this like little kind of pain with that topic for years, and some try to do that, some don't. There are no solutions. That's why we exist. So I was wondering whether that was tackled already in the past, or whether it was issue broadly recognized already.
Yeah, yeah. There was well, we're a large organization with 700 staff. And within our organization, there were pockets that understood we needed to have a more cohesive approach to our content strategy and had actually begun thinking about what that would look like on our website. So there was some nascent exploration on using our existing website to maybe curate a lot of the content in a different way, but it hadn't gotten too far down the track. So that was good because we didn't have to redo a lot of that stuff to implement CAP on demand. Second, most associations and most organizations, and I think my association colleagues would agree with me on this, is we're real vertical. So like our learning team thinks about what it does in CME, our membership and professional engagement team thinks about what it does in professional development. Our laboratory quality services team thinks about what they produce for our customers and laboratory partners who aren't members, and they all do that really, really well. And that's ostensibly their role. But what a platform like this does is cut across, and we're all looking for ways to cut across to bring things together for the member who doesn't care what vertical you're in. They're interested in getting the information we have to share. And so again, this gives us the way to organize that by content, by channel, by speaker, in a new way, in a way that we didn't have to invest on the software side. 'Cause, most associations, our biggest spend is people. Most of those people are doing lots of different things, but they're certainly not creating software like CAP on demand. So why not use a tool that someone else created to for us to invest in and partner to make work for us?
Yeah, and you're touching on several topics there. So one is like buy versus build, at least a term from software. So yeah, we don't see software being builders, and I think most associations recognize that and then don't try to build software. And there are very few that they do, and it doesn't go well usually trying to become a software company and build something like that. But the other thing you touched upon is I found that the larger the association, and CAP is one of the largest associations in the space, the more there is this challenge of what end users expect versus how organization becomes over time organized. And so you start to see these silos being created, and sometimes they have their own kind of P&L in a way. And then even though it's non-profit, but P&L. And then you have on the other side end users who really don't care about that. They care about finding content quickly. So that requires change and change management. Even in a role of a CEO, I found that that's not easy, even with the authority of a CEO. So I was wondering, how did you drive the change? So whether the vision came from you, or it's already kind of bubbling and organically being created, or it came from you, or and how did then conversations start to happen after at least you learned about Evermed during that conference? I'm curious about
Yeah.
the process.
It is definitely a change process. Change is hard for lots of organizations. I think change is particularly hard in large legacy medical associations like ours, just because we've been doing a lot of things the same way with the same people, but the same members and also the same staff. And so it is important for us to innovate. And one of the reasons I go to ASAE and, go to a lot of those other conversations with association professionals is to learn what else folks are doing. I remember a talk where someone said, Google, Apple, and Amazon haven't helped associations at all because everybody expects the speed of Google, the design of Apple, and the customer experience of Amazon, which are, of course, billion, trillion dollar capitalized companies. When folks come to our website, they're like, why isn't this personalized to me? And why can't I find the information like I do in Google? And why does it look you know, crappy compared to what I get on Apple. So yeah, we're all struggling with that. And the vision that I had was again more focused around the curation of content and demonstrating member value for an association that really had prioritized needing to do that. That's one of the reasons why I joined the CAP, to elevate the member experience, to increase the ways and opportunities that members could get involved with our association. I would say a lot of the change management came organically. It wasn't a real intentional process. A lot of it was probably due to the fact that I was new, and so everybody was really listening. And so being new and coming in with an idea, I think folks really were giving me a little bit of benefit of the doubt to try this. Just again, not having a lot of experience working with the team. The change process, everybody saw it, and the pain point about our website can't be understated. I mean, there were member committees formed to discuss the website and improving it. So there was a lot of pain around. So again, this really fit the circumstances. New CEO coming in, an obvious pain point for our members and our members more broadly, and really wanted to tell the story of what we were doing, what value we had. So this all just sort of that comes together. So it was serendipity in many ways. I think a lot of people, I mean, everybody on my team, I'm assuming, watches Netflix. I can't imagine going or something like it, but I don't exactly know how we translated. Well, we want to do that for pathology. But I think folks, it wasn't a big leap for people to see, oh, wow, that could be really cool. So needing to really establish a vision and clarity of goal and all those things probably was less of a hurdle. The real hurdle was timeline and, some of the tactical work involved, like what's the template for these things? Who's going to actually produce them? We don't want to just swap up PT with a voiceover from a conference 3 years ago. You're going to go back and redo that, or are we going to have a plan forward tactically to do that? Who pays for that? How do we manage that? So it's probably more sustaining the energy, creating the content, getting the stuff in there over time. That's a lot more change management because it's easy to start the maintenance and sort of iteration of those also needs to be considered.
Yeah. You mentioned one thing, that there were several groups formed around the feedback on the website. So I'm wondering, you said the pain was there also for some time. So I'm wondering, how is the awareness of that pain happening in CAP? I've heard associations where the members send emails to the CEO, and there's like a lot of emails. So that's how they know there is a pain, or is something else. And what was the impact of all of that? I'm just curious, how was it coming to you and to those groups and the members, that feedback with you to
Yeah, yeah.
change?
Well, it had been an ongoing issue, so much so that the board actually has a committee called our Information Technology Leadership Council or Leadership Committee, ITLC, to bring members together to help vet tools, to review the technology investments of the organization, to be briefed across all the different ways that we involve customers and member technologies. So they wanted to, I mean, I'd never seen anything like that, to be honest. I mean, we've convened in prior organizations, groups of members to help advise us on the look and feel of a product or the user experience, but this is much more operational in terms of vetting tools, having members test and try things. So it got that bad, you know, how I see it, that the members really needed to take over some of that and guide the staff work in that area. We still have that group, and Evermed's part of their conversation. They're really excited about it. So I think, that's a good thing, honestly. It allows buy-in for some of these big changes at the board level. But yeah, I didn't get a lot of feedback directly, but I saw the reports, I knew the history, and a lot of the staff shared those stories with me.
Yeah, you knew there was an issue and there was pain. So you mentioned at the beginning that we often talk about monetization paths because oftentimes we are asked, "Oh, how it is becoming a revenue generating product after you consolidate content to a Netflix style library and turn on the engagement engines, which is at the core of what we do. But how do we monetize?" And we talked about subscription product bundle with annual meetings and membership, institutional subscriptions, but also sponsorship. And from the start, you were clear that this is going to be a membership benefit. So I was wondering, were there any membership trends? Anything around? I hear from organizations, younger members, the more difficult to attract, and sometimes there are some challenges with like retaining. But sometimes it's just a philosophy of the organization. I see it, for example, in Europe, that's very membership-driven organizations, and they would not create a new product and sell it separately from membership. But that's kind of like a general philosophy that everything should be part of membership. So was just wanted to go a little bit deeper and understand how this decision like was so clear from the get go and what were the drivers of that.
Yeah, sure. So, I this was really important to me because I didn't want the pricing structure or the cost to become a barrier to the adoption of this technology. That was primary to me because then we would get distracted in all of that. And I am a member of a couple associations, and I resent getting what I call nickel and dined for, being charged for programs that I think should be part of my dues. I understand it. Trust me, I understand it. I'm an association CEO. But in this particular case, it was more important, and certainly more important to our board and our senior team, that we create value for members that was free to them or part of what we're already charging in our dues, because there are always and continue to be questions about why join. Why am I paying you these dues and then you're charging me for this or that or the other thing? And I didn't want to get in those conversations out of the gate. Now there may be a time, and again, I haven't had this conversation recently with the team, where there's some kind of value added or premium or different approach to how we provide this content. But to me, I really wanted to get the proof of concept done, which we've accomplished, and understand who's using it and why and what the opportunities are before we begin to monetize that. In terms of member segments, I don't, again, we just launched, so I couldn't tell you what demographic is looking at this and all the things associated with that. I think it's pretty typical, at least in physician organizations, that you have pretty high engagement with the medical students, residents, trainees, fellows, primarily because in most cases those dues are free or very, very low. And there's a lot of opportunity, to learn and network. And what we see then is as physicians and our pathologists are new to practice, they drop and they drop membership for lots of different reasons. Membership's not free anymore. They're new in practice and don't have time. We hear that a lot to engage. They're covering for partners who are more seasoned and not necessarily working the same schedule. And a lot of our new in practice folks have new families, not just new jobs. So again, association engagement drops. And I think that's pretty widely the case, and then picks up again. We see that when you have more time in. What we'd like to do is bridge that resident, trainee, fellow to more mid-career and think about what kind of content we can put in here that is essential for those new to practice, new in practice pathologists, that would drive them to join and drive them to stick with the CAP. So, for example, if there's a channel to molecular pathology that you accessed as a fellow or a resident, and you knew the 15 world experts on molecular pathology are part of our molecular pathology committee, and they're going to do a quarterly update on what's new and hot and important in molecular pathology, that every pathologist needs to know. And that's part of your learning and how you stay current by using CAP on demand to get that content in fellowship. You're going to want to stick with that. You're not going to want a 5-year gap and rejoin 5 years later to get that content. Maybe that's value. I think it is. We'll test that out in practice when we see, is this something that particular segment wants. I find we generally overstate these generational differences. There's a lot of us who act young like me. I'm a student now. I always am. But certainly it's going to drive our content strategy. We're probably going to start with those things that might be useful for professional development, executive education, leadership, not just science, so that our members who are new to practice get those basics. And this, again, provides us another tool to do that. And then everything else we provide is on there. And with the on-demand platform, it's personalized. So you can talk about, you can select what interests you and what's going to be served up to you when you log in. I hope that reinforces the engagement and reinforces their retention.
Yeah, 100%. I think that the members, a different time of their career, a different kind of information. So the platform, even having like thousands of pieces of content, can surface that content for where they are in their career, what they need, is very powerful. And that's what, YouTube does with, I don't know, billion videos, and or Netflix with all the shows. There is something about it that is powerful. And also, I often think that the content, and I said it a few times publicly, that content is probably the most under-leveraged asset that organizations, associations have, especially to drive year-round engagement, and some monetization as well, because year-round engagement is a powerful, very, very powerful outcome that when it works, it makes everything better. It makes
Yeah,
everything better.
no, exactly. And I think, for us and the things that I'm thinking about, it wasn't just that we did CAP on demand. So, we did an entire revision and refresh of all of our member public facing newsletters. We have looked really closely at the member facing pages on our website so that when we do that revision, which is coming soon, this all is cohesive and presented in a way that makes sense to the audience. And that wasn't the case because prior, like I said, we had these verticals that were operating out of their verticals. So you had a look and feel of our LMS, you had a look and feel on our comms and marketing strategy, you had a look and feel for our annual conference. So this has to potentially be tied into that overall communications and marketing strategy, that same look and feel. Doesn't have to be identical, but that same look and feel to say this is CAP on demand, this is CAP annual meeting, this is CAP newsletter, it's CAP magazine. All of that needs to tie together. And again, this is just another channel that we can use to do that.
That's really powerful. And again, the way you were speaking about it is always the focus is on the end user first.
Right.
In anything, whether it's a
Yeah, I mean,
uh-huh.
and again, we want this to be something people go to daily. There's certain things I do daily. I go to my SAE newsletter daily. There's a couple of newsletters I read on AI that I go to daily. I check LinkedIn daily. All the feeds. That's what I do first thing in the morning. And what we want this to be is something that a pathologist adds to that daily routine, right? And so we're going to populate this with our daily newscast. We're going to populate this with highlights from our annual meeting, but also lots of other engagement that we've had to tell the story of what CAP is doing or what pathologists need to know. So to me, it's less about let's just produce all the content that we already have, but more what's our strategy to keep this updated, relevant, different, new. We're doing a new radio theater podcast where we'll have interesting pathology and, just to bring a whole different lens to pathology practice and potentially make it patient facing too. So the public knows more about pathology and what pathology is up to. And again, this could be the place we host some of that. It started with the annual conference because that's what we had recorded before. But as we evolve these new content products, this gives us the opportunity to get them all together.
I think this is the first time that I heard this vision from anyone communicated so clearly that you want a product like this to be part of daily life of the end user, in this case, and we're talking about pathology, because it does have that potential, like it has for your sources, or like one of the things I check daily is I don't use any more Instagram feedback and Facebook and so on, but I do with YouTube. I check YouTube. A lot of things that I learn in AI, I stay up to date by checking YouTube. I have certain feeds, certain things I'm subscribed. So it became part of my daily life because that's where I find it's curated and I found it easily. And that's really, really powerful. And it does have that potential because we found that, end users don't have a time to do another course of 6 hours unless they have to, but they do have time to check 5 minutes, 10 minutes, something new they heard. Someone mentioned it, they didn't know what it was about. There was a new study, and to go to a trusted source of information, especially nowadays, from a trusted speaker, right? That's something that's fresh, credible, relevant, presented in a beautiful, user experience that's, easy to use, search and find. When those components of quality, freshness, trust, and user experience come together and it's in one place and it's simple, it's easy, then the magic happens. Like, all of this is important. It's like if we don't do one of those, then they will not make it have it as a
Yeah,
daily
yeah,
experience.
it's a massive shift though, because those of us working in legacy organizations and sort of taking a more traditional approach to education and what we present to members in terms of educational content. And again, on demand for us is more than just that. It's a platform for us to share news. It's a platform for us to post different videos on different topics. It's not just CME. It's not just conference education, but as you said, what do you do for the other 360 days of the year that you're not at your 5 days of your annual conference? Look, you could have two annual conferences. You could have the one you do in person. You could have the one you do every day throughout the year and have 300 pieces of content that roll into, yeah, the CAP annual meeting. So the other thing you can do is, we all say no to people who want to present at our conference. We all say no to people who want to publish, in our journals. We all say no to trainees that want to present their research in poster sessions because there's a limited amount of space. This gives us the opportunity to give them another venue. Don't have the money, don't have the resource, but you still want to present at CAP. Why couldn't we do that recorded? Record that content. It's obviously peer review. It's obviously got to be good. Again, it's got to fit with our brand of being credible, scientific, valid, all the things. But wow, the opportunity to open that up to a bunch of folks that might not otherwise be able to participate, either because we didn't have the space, they can't travel, or all of the things. This could be huge in terms of content creation. Because I think that, again, to me, is the point of doing something like this. That's the point where all of this really pivots. Do you have a strategy to create content, or are you just putting old stuff online? And if you're just putting old stuff online, you gotta be really careful, right? Because who really wants to watch? How often are they going to use it? You know, that's why I'm interested in creating something that's part of your daily routine. That's a huge responsibility because we got content. That also should be what we're doing, right? But it may require different staffing. It may require different resources. We built studio in our office to record. Not everyone's able to do that. Not everybody needs that. But again, if you're just slapping some video that someone recorded on some member phone, again, do you really want to watch that? So it does require some intentional choices about how and who create content and how you're going to resource that. But if you have the capacity to do that, I think it's going to, again, it's going to make CAP on demand far, far more useful.
100%. And I learned also working with other associations that there's a lot of people, there are members that want to be part of that. There are a lot of people that want to contribute to it, one or two pieces of content, or be sort of an editor in different subspecialty or subcategory of content. So that's the great part about associations. So
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can
and
get
again, there's so many connections. So, I mean, we most of us have scientific journals. Are you producing content from there? Is that something your publisher does? Can you create an agreement where you're taking an article a week and having the author walk folks through that? So that's again something you're already doing. It's just a little value add to this. There's just opportunities like that are amazing. What if you identified the 50 global leaders in the field? So for us, it'd be pathology. What if I had the top 10 prostate cancer pathologists, and every week we rotate and they do a 15, 20-minute grand rounds and we post it on our cap on demand. People are going to come to that content. They want to learn that stuff. Again, it's got to be quality, it's got to be digestible, but that's huge value. You're not getting anywhere else, right? We're going to host that. Yeah, we could slap that on our website. Who's going to find it? something like this, it's maybe going to go to the folks that know who that person is. They're maybe one of their key interests that they indicate when they logged into Cap on Bananas prostate. It's going to go straight to that. Right? Like, holy crap, I get the opportunity to watch this from wherever I am, my living room, my physician lounge, the laboratory between cases. Why not?
Yeah, yeah. No, that's really powerful and a powerful vision as well. I think exclusive content and also something we exploring right now is the right time to turn on the asynchronous Q&A feature, where next to the video you can actually ask questions. So the same well-known pathologists in prostate cancer you mentioned that find a mechanism so that they are also happy to answer a few questions here and there. So then you have these other doctors, sometimes it's around the world, that they ask questions, say, well, actually, I engaged in a conversation with the author of this paper, well-known professor there, and actually I got a response from someone from their team or someone who wrote paper with them. That's really powerful.
It's
And that's what,
a huge value creator, but it requires, and again, it requires, thinking more like a producer or a newscaster or a director than it does just classic CME administrator for a trade association or a medical. That's honestly the biggest change. It's introducing new technology is always the change. We're used to that. We update our phones. We know what that feels like. Getting folks to think differently, taking a mindset of what is relevant content, what am I telling me they want to know? How do I get in front of that and make that accessible to them? You'd think that would be relatively straightforward for most of us to imagine, but it's not. You got to really show people what that looks like. And that's why we have this, I think incredible potential with Cap on Demand, because you can actually show people what that looks like.
oh, I love that. It's giving me a couple of ideas right now, speaking. Two more questions I have for you. So one is about us. What made you comfortable to even explore with us? If you remember now any of the points from the ASAE or later on
Yeah,
in any
yeah.
of our engagements or conversations.
Well, what made me comfortable was you'd work with ACC. We all like make sure you understand our business, which is not typical. And no society, medical society or association is the same. There's lots of the things that are this, but we all have our nuances. So that gave me a little bit of comfort. The other thing was, it wasn't really about the money. I don't even think we paid you to get started or we didn't pay you that much. So there wasn't a huge upfront if it didn't work out. So that was pretty good. And, you partnered with us on the strategy versus just, charging us a bunch of hours to produce things. So that was, again, that made me comfortable. It made the team comfortable.
All right, great. Thanks for sharing that. And then the last question I have for you is, what is a piece of advice that you would give to another association who wants to do something like that or is thinking about something like that, that has a lot of content, but it's where you were like maybe a year ago with
Yeah.
content?
Well, there's lots of advice. I'd love to go to ASE next year and have you do another session with some other people, because I learned so much just from that one time in Cleveland. But I mean, I think the thing that you said there that really struck me was this is not replacing your LMS, right? This is a whole different, I forget what you call it, XMS,
LXP, like a learning experience platform.
learning
Yeah.
experience platform. To me, we still have our LMS. We still produce CME content for members that need the certification, need the transcript, need the badge, need all the things. They do that there. This is really about the member experience. This is a lot more like Amazon Prime or Netflix, or curating content in an accessible way to members in a way that they're gonna watch it, that they would do in other parts of their daily life. Like you said, you watch YouTube. I watch YouTube, get home at night or whatever. And man, does that revolutionize your engagement with the association, right? So that I think is how folks could approach thinking about it. But I do think, and again, we haven't resolved this. Again, we're pretty new at this. It's going to require some staffing differently, because you got to have folks that are thinking like, as I mentioned, producers, directors, media professionals, more than the classic sort of annual meeting coordinator people. And that's a change. So think about that. And ultimately, with all the tools and the way they're evolving, my hope is the cost of producing a lot of this content and the time it takes to do it is going to be reduced dramatically. I don't AI videos. Those aren't credible, but certainly it doesn't have that. The cost of that doesn't have to be a significant barrier. Isn't really for us. It's more the mindset about what is relevant, what do we want to have in there, what do our members want from us, how we get started with that, et cetera, et cetera.
That's an amazing vision and a great piece of advice and a great point to end this episode. First of all, really thank you for this direct, visionary, open, honest, authentic conversation. I really enjoyed it. And we'll stay for a couple more minutes to make sure everything is
Yeah, and
uploaded. But
yeah, and I feel bad talking about this because our team did all the work. So hopefully they'll watch this and know that I appreciate everything that they did too.
all right, yeah, all right. Well, thank you, Mike.